Welcome back to Season 5 of the Changing Earth podcast with Sarah F. Hathaway, blending survival fiction and fact to bring you entertaining education that will help you dream, survive, and thrive. And now, here's your host, Sarah F. Hathaway.
Hello, and welcome back to the Changing Earth podcast. This is episode number 197, Season 5, episode 34. Happy to have you back with me today. As I mentioned last week, we got some cool goings-ons in the Changing Earth world. We're going to welcome a new co-host next season, Mr. Chin Gibson. And I'm so excited to have a partner in crime, and so we can keep the show going. You know, the interviews and that take a lot of time and a lot of energy for me to do, and that was one of my biggest concerns. So having a partner to be able to assist with the topics will be great, and we're gonna have some fun with it. So I'm excited. Let's see. We have been trying to get our garden together. I have to build a fence for it first, and I'm putting my foot down. I don't want T-posts and fencing and have it look raggedy. So we're going to go with some pallets and make like a little white picket fence, you know, and do something like that to keep the dog out of there, keep the deer out of there. So we're still struggling there. You know, I ended up turning my big garden site into a chicken coop because it got overtaken by ground squirrels. So there was no real hope in saving it. So, you know, we have a long growing season in California, so we're lucky there. We get a little bit of time to get it put together before we have to worry about it. So I've also been working on my self-defense techniques, of course, and with, you know, my instructors are out of town this week, so I've been putting a lot of hours in teaching, and it's just such a rewarding experience to be able to watch people grow both physically and mentally, you know, as they partake in their martial arts journey. I find it super rewarding, and I encourage all of you to go out there and get some practice and find a school that fits you. There's so many schools out there and so many options, and you know, you just start getting more physically fit, more flexible, just feeling better about yourself. Plus, you got all these great skills for self-defense. So I encourage you to go out there and make that happen. We still have The Endless Night coming out in June. I was so excited to be able to have this book done early because it's really given me time to really go over it and cull it. And so I'm still making some corrections to the audiobook, and I'm also still making some corrections to the actual novel, which is great because it's given me a lot of time to do it beforehand rather than trying to scramble after it's already been released and finding, you know, yeah, I don't care. You can read a book a million bazillion times and you still find stuff that needs to be fixed. So it's been really nice to have good leeway on it to be able to really give it a lot of love. So I hope that you're going to love that story. It's definitely a dark place, and thus the name The Endless Night. But it's the journey that the characters need to go through to get to the next phase. So hopefully you guys will love that book. But it's just kind of my warning that, you know, it's an adventure, that's for sure. So last week we caught up with Vince in the Dark Days in Denver story as he was leaving the homesteads and with gear, and such a great character Gear is, and you know, that was provided by one of my listeners and good friend of mine. So he's a cool character, and we'll just have to see where his character ends up going. But this week we are revisiting Erica as she tries to survive this journey south under TJ Swenson's watchful eye and that of Commander Gray, and just, you know, a harrowing adventure for her. And you know, she's just trying to stay alive and find her moment that she can escape this nightmare. So today, Phil Rabalais is back with us, and he is going to share his survival story that he has written called American Insurgents. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and get into chapter 34 of Dark Days in Denver. Chapter 34. Erica sat in her usual position while the men were taking a break. Her hands were zip-tied behind her back. Her feet were tied together. The chain that used to be around her waist was now permanently kept clasped around her neck. Pulling on it, the men would laugh at her and bark at her like she was their pet dog. Sitting there waiting, she tore off another strip of clothing from the back of her shirt. She dug her finger through the blood on her back and painted her initials on it. She found a small branch and tied the piece of material to it. "Come on, we're going again," Merkley told her. Erica noticed he wasn't looking very well. He was growing weak from the excursion. She almost liked traveling again, if it weren't for the company she was with. Her body felt strong, and the scraps nourished it just enough. Merkley was making mistakes in his exhaustion and forgot Swenson's warning. Anticipating his approach, Erica knew she could take him. She just needed to wait until he unhooked the chain from the tree. He bent down to unlock it. Erica's body shuddered with anticipation. "What are you doing, Merkley?" Swenson asked, appearing out of nowhere. "Do you see the T on her back? This girlie is mine. I don't want you anywhere near her. Do you understand?" He spat at Merkley as he barked out the words. "Commander Gray couldn't find you. It's time to go," Merkley said, shuffling away weakly. "Sorry to rain on your parade," Swenson commented, unhooking her. She sighed heavily, knowing the opportunity was gone. Swenson snapped his head back at her, hearing the emotion in her breath. "I told you to never run from me again, right?" he yelled at her. She didn't say anything. The glare she reserved just for him returned. She envisioned herself slicing through his neck. "Right?" he asked again, his hand reaching for his whip. "Yes," Erica mumbled. "What? I couldn't quite hear that," Swenson chided her. "Yes, you piece of crap! Yes! You told me not to run from you," Erica yelled back at him. He looked at her curiously. She hadn't lashed out verbally since he killed her husband. "But you still haven't promised me that you won't," Swenson demanded. "Piss off," Erica told him. "Don't get lippy with me, girlie. Sheila can take care of that real fast, too," he added, reaching down again. Erica turned her back to him to get into the normal walking position. Pulling on the chain on her neck, Swenson noticed that her shirt looked more torn in the back than it was before. Erica fell back to the ground as the chain ripped at her throat. Falling hard on her back, she got up quickly and stood defiantly in front of him, with her back to him. "That's right. Hold still now," he teased, cracking his whip in the air behind her. Erica braced for the strike, but she was not going to turn around. "Swenson, quit playing with the dog," the commander commented, laughing. He was a cold-hearted man, and Erica was really beginning to despise him as well. Commander Gray's radio crackled with the voice from the other side. "Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Good to know. Yes, sir, I'll let her know. Thank you, sir," he concluded, putting the radio down. "Put her on her knees, Swenson," the commander directed. Swenson's hand went to his whip. Erica immediately kneeled. Commander Gray gave the order, not Swenson. She knew if she didn't obey, the whip would follow, and she wasn't taking another lick from that thing for no reason. "That was the Supreme General. He wanted me to let you know that your son, Dexter, is now in federal custody," Commander Gray began. Hearing the words, Erica's heart sank in dismay. It couldn't be true. Dexter was too slick to be captured. What were they doing anyway, she wondered. "Today we're going into Amarillo to arrange a ferry ride across the Ogallala Lake. If you even breathe wrong while we are in that city, your son will die," Commander Gray told her. "My son is going to die anyway," Erica hissed back. Swenson yanked on the chain so her head tilted back. He punched her across the face. "Don't," Swenson directed. "He's right, Erica. I'm the only one saving you from all the horrible things that man has running around in his mind. If you screw this up, try to run, do anything other than what you are told to do, your son will die, and you will wish you were dead. Do you hear me?" the commander snapped. He was usually so calm and collected that it surprised Erica. "Yes," she grumbled quietly. Swenson went to pull on the chain again, but Erica felt it coming. Yes, I hear you," she said loud and clear. "I'll have this bitch trained in no time," Swenson commented to Commander Gray. It made Erica's skin crawl to hear him talk like that. Time would tell. She could follow directions and patiently wait for her moment, but eventually the moment would come. "I will kill him," she told herself. As they neared the town, Swenson put the burlap sack back over her head. The air was cold in the dim sun, and the plants looked sad from the lack of it.
Erica understood their feelings. Since the sun became shrouded, her world had become a nightmare. She almost blamed the sun for it. If it would just shine again, maybe it would make everything better, she dreamed. She walked directly in front of Swenson. He held the chain around her neck and the small of her back, ready for anything she might attempt to draw attention. If the people knew they were walking Erica Moore through town, there would be hell to pay for sure. Erica tried to mentally reach out to the people on the streets passing by her. They all looked at her like she was garbage, an owned individual being traded to the next owner. If only they knew, she mused. They went to the boat dock to catch the ferry. Waiting with the men for Merkley to return, Swenson whispered in her ear, "One day you'll be mine. The Supreme General will tire of you and throw you to the dogs. I've been thinking of what I'd do with a fiery little spirit like yourself. Sheila and I would delight in making you scream." He went on and on. Serge laughed at his friend's antics, but Bishop seemed annoyed by it. "Can't you just leave her alone for a while?" Bishop told him. "Why, Bishop? You like her?" Swenson asked. "No, you're just a dick, TJ," Bishop contended. "Good, because as soon as the Supreme General is done with her, she's mine. I already marked her," he boasted. "Yeah, I remember," Bishop agreed, as Merkley returned from the ticket counter. He spoke softly to Commander Gray. Erica tried to listen in. 2 days? What do you mean 2 days? Commander Gray snapped at him. "Aren't you the son of the acting leader of the Mercs?" "I am, but this area is all militia run. The forged letter from my father is the only thing that got us a ride that fast. They've been moving people nonstop," Merkley explained. "Great. Just great. You guys want to camp outside of town or get a room somewhere?" Commander Gray asked. "Let's get a room. Maybe we could get some action," Serge suggested, grabbing himself. "This bounty hasn't been any fun at all." Bishop smiled at him in agreement but didn't say anything. The men huddled up to talk, and Erica was standing behind Swenson. He would pull on her neck every few seconds to make sure she was there. Erica was ripping another piece of cloth off her shirt and trying to get the blood to paint her initials on it. There was a good pole right next to her if she could get it done in time and connected there. Frantically, she tore at the scabs, drawing blood and writing the letters. She inched her way towards the pole and tied it around a screw just as TJ looked up from the conversation. "Get over here," he said, ripping her down onto her hands and knees. He was sure more of her shirt was gone, but didn't have an explanation for its disappearance. "Okay, TJ, you win. We'll camp outside of town so there's less chance of Erica being spotted," Commander Gray acquiesced. "She's keeping that hood on the whole time we're here. My point is, there's less ways for her to figure out an escape route. Let's just stick to the mission and not get distracted," he replied, tugging on her chain again. When they reached a campsite that was isolated enough from the public, they set up camp. Getting chained to another tree, Erica went to work on another flag to make for anyone who might be tracking her. Swenson made like he was busy, but he was watching her from the corner of his eye. He saw her tear the piece from her shirt and then cringe in pain as she produced blood from her back. She put the blood on the rag and put it in her waistline to save for later. Swenson stomped over to her. The other men thought he was just going to toy with her again and barely took notice. Erica, however, saw the look in his eyes, and she started backing up towards the tree to evade his grasp. "Stop moving," Swenson commanded. Erica hit the tree and circled around it. "Where do you think you're going?" he asked her, pulling on her chain. "You don't run from me, ever," he insisted. "You may not have said it yet, but you will learn it." Erica coughed as he pulled her back around the tree. The chain caught on the other chain holding on the burlap sack and sunk hard into her neck. "Get over here," he insisted, ignoring her coughing. "Stand up." He dug down the back of her pants and found the small strip of cloth she hid there. He held it up, reading the initials EM on it. "How long have we been playing this game?" he asked the commander, showing him the strip of cloth. Commander Gray looked at it concerned. "Don't worry, boss. It's a needle in a haystack. I'll make sure it doesn't happen again." "Stay there," he directed Erica. She stood steadily in front of him. He snatched his whip from its holster, and in 2 cracks her shirt was gone. Standing before him in her bra and pants, he smiled widely. "She wants to rip her shirt up?" "No more shirt," Swenson declared. Now I can admire my work all the time, he said proudly. Bishop, Commander Gray asked, curious about the medical implications of Swenson's actions. Just make sure she doesn't get too cold at night and it won't kill her, especially since we haven't seen the sun in days, he added. Erica hated Swenson more and more. It was cold next to the lake, waiting for the ferry boat. She kept hoping that she would see Bennett coming to make some grand rescue or the mercenary army with tanks headed her way. But there was nothing. All the next day she sat watching the road, shivering in the eerie sunshine. No one's coming, Swenson told her. We killed them all. I know, Erica admitted sadly. But you still think there may be some chance that they're still alive, don't you? He asked. Erica didn't say anything. She just looked through the hood at the road. I put 2 bullets in the man myself. You saw the bombs we dropped. Star is going to be sold as soon as she's found, and Dexter is already in federal custody, Swenson assured her. Bennett will find me, she thought. And then there's First Sergeant Bennett, the traitor. If he would have stayed with the federal forces, he would still be alive now. Erica's heart skipped a beat, and she looked towards him. His sickening breath filled the hood as he spoke. That's right. We made sure he didn't leave Denver alive, Swenson assured her. She tried not to let his chatter bother her, but it ate into every fiber of her being. If they're all dead, what am I returning to? She wondered.
Erica's most important survival skill at this point is maintaining hope. And TJ Swenson is absolutely 100% aware of that. And he tries to destroy it at any point he can. So definitely a mischievous, malicious character there. And, we'll just have to see what happens with his character as time ticks on. And many, many of my readers were wishing him a very, very slow death. And you'll get to see a little bit more of that as we come. I don't want to spill too much about that. So, he just is out to destroy Erica's hope and her confidence, because that's how you keep people captive. You have to eliminate their hope that this is going to end, that there's something else there. And he's fully aware of that, and he definitely tries to destroy that whenever he can. Switching gears a little bit, Phil Rabalais is back with us today, and he is discussing the book that he wrote called American Insurgent. And, honestly, I don't get much time to read anymore because I'm so busy writing, and now that I'm going back to work and all the podcast production and stuff like that, my time is very, very limited. I do all the prepping that I do, plus all the training that I do. It really makes for a very tight schedule. But, the more you do, the more you do, the more you do, the more you do. But Phil's book is definitely one that I would love to pick up and read because it sounds just so interesting. Phil Rabalais is the host of the Matter of Facts podcast. He is born a Texan and raised in southeast Louisiana. He enlisted in the Louisiana Army National Guard, and he deployed to Iraq in 2004, and again for his state's Hurricane Katrina relief mission. After his enlistment, Phil graduated from Southeastern Louisiana University in Hammond, Louisiana, with a BA in Business Management. He is a staunch free speech and Second Amendment advocate, a self-admitted prepper, and the host of Matter of Facts podcast. The podcast is based in no small part on his belief in self-reliance, small government, and the right of people to defend themselves. He lives in Manville, Louisiana, with his wife of 10 years and their daughter. If you'd like to find out more about Phil, you can go over to www.mofpodcast.com. That's www.mofpodcast.com. So let's go ahead and welcome Phil to the show. Hey, I am honored to have Phil Rabalais back on the show, and we are talking survival stories today. And Phil, you have a book out called American Insurgent, and I want to get into it. So why don't you just go ahead, reintroduce yourself to the audience, let them know a little bit about you and what makes you tick, and then we'll get into your book.
Well, thanks, Sarah, for having me. My name is Phil Rabalais. I'm the host of the Matter of Facts podcast. I'm a Second Amendment advocate, military veteran, husband and father, and most recently now published author, because I didn't have enough things demanding my time and attention, I thought, why not just dive headfirst into writing a book? But
Oh.
but my what got me started prepping and kind of started me down this path was, like I said last time, was Hurricane Katrina, because I was in the Louisiana National Guard. I watched firsthand what a metro area looks like when it's reduced to the third world, in this case by natural disaster. And that really got me thinking along the lines of, I need to do things so that my family's not stuck in the Superdome.
Yeah.
Which we weren't, thankfully, but like that took me out of the casual prepper line, the one who says, make sure I have some extra batteries and a couple cans of beans, and put me on a very different prepping path.
Yeah, respect there. And I tend to, I know that there's social unrest, there's blah, blah, but I don't know. I tend to stay very earth-based because it's just my belief that if we lose contact with our planet, with all of our technology, and we think we're all that, and we control Mother Nature, well, guess what? Mother Nature will have her way when she says it is time, right? And it just changes everything in the blink of an eye. And that's really where I base a lot of my stuff off of. So what made you want to decide to write American Insurgent? What really prompted you to want to just write the fictional story instead of just teaching people how to be prepared?
Well, two authors inspired me. First of all, a lot of people have read it. It's kind of a cult classic, Unintended Consequences by John Ross. And that was John Ross's, about 20 years ago, that was his idea of what would happen if, quote, the state continued to push towards gun confiscation, continue to trample on the rights of people. His premise for the book was that eventually somebody would strike back and things would get progressively more and more ugly from there. And I ascribe to a lot of what the conclusions he came to. I just think it would happen differently, personally. Mm-hmm. And bearing in mind that, if memory serves me, he published this book in the mid-'90s, and now we're in 2018, 2019. We did just cross over. How's that little battle a couple of days ago? I'm going to be doing that for at least 3 months, saying 2018.
Oh, I hear you.
Anyway.
All my signatures on my books, I got to remember 2019. Yeah.
But I thought that, today in the modern age and the social media age, I thought things would happen differently. And the author that kind of put me on the path to writing a fictional novel, in addition to the advocacy work that I do and the podcast, where we're very preachy about the Second Amendment and individual liberties. Both me and my co-host are ardent, hardcore libertarians, which is where a lot of our ideals come from. But Franklin Horton, when he wrote The Borrowed World, and when he wrote that series and we interviewed him on our podcast, the one thing he said that jumped out at me and grabbed me by the collar was, he wrote the books to sprinkle the prepper knowledge in between the pages of fiction. In other words, like, people read it and they learn without even realizing they're learning. Because if you took all that same knowledge and put it in an educational resource, it wouldn't market to probably as large of an audience as it did. But because it's fiction and it's entertaining, people read it. And me and my co-host, we every time one of his books comes out, we're both reading it at the same time. We're emailing and texting back and forth all the time saying, dude, I didn't think about this. We need to add that to the show. Dude, we need to look at this in our preps. So,
right? Yeah.
Between those two authors, they were the ones who kind of put me on that path of, you can continue what I see as my own advocacy work in writing a fictional novel to try to trick people into thinking about really important concepts.
Yep, I love that. That's exactly where I come from too. And also, when you attach an emotion, like especially with females, we're very emotionally driven, right? So if you can attach an emotion to that lesson where they go, oh my gosh, that was so impactful, I need to remember this for the future because it's very important to me, then that tends to help them actually remember how to do that thing instead of just reading stereo print, blah, 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 right? Yep.
Yeah.
That same point. So when you write, do you plan out your whole book? Like, some people start from the end and go back, and I just flow with it. So what do you do when you're writing?
I tried planning this. Every time I did, it failed horribly. Like, I seriously, I sat down and tried to outline out how the book was going to work.
Timeline.
And every time I did that, it didn't work. So I finally just gave up, wadded the whole outline up, threw it across the room, and I just sat down and started writing. And people would ask me, people who were following along with me as I was writing the story, close friends and family and people that I was sharing the book with, while it was in production, they would ask me like, so what's going to happen next? I'm like, I don't know.
I don't.
I really don't know. I got to sit down and write and just, and there were times I'd write like a whole chapter to come back the next day. I hate all that, delete it all and start over again. I don't see myself as having like created this story. To me, the story's there. I just had to open my ears up and hear it and write it.
Yep.
And the story tells itself.
Yeah, I love that. That's exactly where I come from. I call it my writing demon, that it's just like, that's where we're going today,
Mm-hmm.
So, yep, I love it. So the concept for your book, let's talk about like the concept for your book and then how you formed it. So what's the baseline for it?
Well, the baseline for the book is I'm a history nerd, first of all, and I believe really, really seriously in historical parallels. Like, I don't think we're doomed to repeat history if we don't learn from it. I think we're doomed to repeat history, period.
No matter what.
Human beings have not appreciably evolved or changed in several thousand years. We're still driven by wants for power, wants for land, for property, for whatever. We're all driven by the same needs we always have been. Now, we think we've evolved a lot because now we can, walk on our feet and use computers and all this cool stuff. But at the end of the day, we're driven by the same wants. Mm-hmm. And there are some people out there who very simply want to be left alone. And there's some people that don't want to leave other people alone. And there will always be a natural conflict there. It's been there since the dawn of human history. It's been there throughout our own history as a nation. And I look at historical parallels. So when somebody tells me, well, if everybody's guns get taken, we're going to have another civil war or another revolutionary war, I look back at history and I've seen that happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
The Revolutionary War, well, a lot of people don't think about it, but the shot heard around the world, the initial hostile action at Lexington and Concord, that was because that was on the tail end of the Boston Tea Party. It was after arrest warrants had been issued for the newly formed militia government, which was operating in tandem and in contra to the Crown-appointed leadership in those areas. These British soldiers were coming to take the powder magazines from the militias because if they take your powder, you can't use your cannons, you can't use your muskets, you can't use your rifles. They were coming to disarm the militia because the militia was going to support the militia government.
Yep.
So the Revolutionary War was, yes, it was a war about taxation and representation and all these very high-minded ideals, but the Revolutionary War was initiated by this country's first gun grab.
Yes.
And if
many people don't know that,
if you stop and you look at the Revolutionary War in that context, that yes, it was more than just guns, but the attempt to remove the use of arms from the colonial militia, that's what started it. And in modern times, a lot of people look at the militia as a concept and they say, we have the National Guard, we have the Army, this, that, and the other. But the Militia Act of 1903, which is still in the books and still very valid to this day as federal law, clearly makes the case that if you are not in the military, the reserves, the National Guard, or a public official, you are a member of the unorganized militia. So when you look at what's happening in today's politics, which a lot of this started after I'd started writing the book, which kind of freaks people out that
I hear that.
But people that knew the book was coming before it came out, they started looking in modern politics and they were like, dude, do you have a crystal ball or something someplace? Because you knew this was going to happen. And I'm like, well, I knew it was going to happen sooner or later. I didn't know it was going to happen right now.
I was hoping it wouldn't happen right now. I've had that question myself. Are you the next Nostradamus? I'm like, oh, I hope not.
I hope not too. Right? But I guess that's always been my point of view is that when somebody says, well, if this happens, this will happen, I'm going to flip a history book open and if I can find it in a history book, it's going to happen.
Yeah.
And this has happened before. So that's part of my idea behind the book is to explore what would happen if the state, and I don't mean state in the concept of a state like Texas or Louisiana, but the state is in government. If the state attempted to remove from the common man the ability to keep and bear arms, if the state attempted to impose a complete prohibition on citizens being able to use force to protect themselves, what would the response be and what would that look like? And that's what I try to explore in this hopefully will always be a
Very
fictional
cool.
novel.
I'm gonna have to check it out. Okay, so do you have a favorite character in your book?
I go back and forth on this because I mean, I freely
They're
admit,
all
and,
like your babies.
honestly, they are. But I mean,
Yep.
I crib this straight from Franklin because like Franklin cracks me up because he freely admits that many of his characters are based on like him, close friends, family,
Yeah, yeah.
and you know, when I started writing this book, I found myself unintentionally slipping into that. Like the main characters are based on people I know. Like in my head,
Yep.
when I look at, and my wife says the same thing. She said when she read the part of John, the main character, she's like, "That's you," and I'm like, "Yeah, a lot of it is.
Yeah.
It's my personality. It's my beliefs. It's a lot of my background." And you know, my favorite character goes back and forth between John, which sounds a little self-aggrandizing because he's based
Hey,
he's based on a lot of my personality, but it also goes to his spouse in the book, Rachel, who is unabashedly based on my wife, and I freely admit that, and because those two characters are really they are like the central point that all this story revolves around. Because even though this is a story of you know, violence and war and all this, that, and the other. The action in the book is really only about a third to a half of the book at the most. A lot of what this book centers around is the relationship between John and his wife and his friend, and it centers upon the conflict between the main character who is saying go 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 go, and one of the secondary characters who is questioning and doubting and saying, is this too much? Is this too harsh? Should we need to stop and think about this? We need to back off. And it's really a story of the emotions and the relationships involved between these people. And I really, this is something from my own background, but I really wanted to try to tie in the idea that like there is a cost to this sort of thing. If we want to look at a modern civil war, there's going to be an emotional traumatic cost to it, to anyone who's involved in it, whether they are an active participant in the conflict or just a bystander. And it's going to be the stress and the trauma and the emotions and the heartache and the arguments and the families at each other's throats about it. And those are some of the back currents I try to bring into the book, because it's like I tell everybody, I'm like, you know, if you come away from this book and you don't have some sense of like these people are tortured by what they're doing, then you need to go back and reread it because you missed
because you missed like a ton. Love
well,
it.
there's half a chapter that goes through the main character having an emotional breakdown.
Yeah.
Which is something like I talked to Brian Duff about that recently, and because we did an episode on post-traumatic stress disorder on my show, and that was something he brought up. He said that's not something like most authors really encounter. They don't get into the emotional back currents in this type of thing. And it's like I told Brian, I'm like, but I have been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder in the past. So I had to put that in the book because I know it's there. And to me, it makes no sense to tell a story of an average person pushed into extraordinary circumstances if you don't show that this person is human and they're gonna pay the bill when it comes due.
Well, that's what really immerses your reader into the story. That's what puts them, and you know, people can't relate. Superheroes are great, you know, they can do it all, whatever. But if you don't show that this is an average human being, this could be you in this scenario, then your readers can't really immerse themselves and relate to that character as well as if you show every side of what's going on. It's not just go out guns a-blaring and nobody cares because you're taking human life. That's never going to happen, or else you're just an a-hole. I'm sorry, you know, like that's just not reality. So I like that, that you bring the real emotion into that, because that will immerse the reader into that real emotion of what's going on. Well, it's perfect.
Yeah. And
so
the other thing that stood out to me was that I had a listener on my podcast point out that he reads a lot in this genre, and he said he gets very frustrated that like every main character is this Navy SEAL, Delta operator, space shuttle door gunner. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And like, oh, of course this guy's got a closet full of full auto guns, and of course he's got all this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
It's like it's a superhero story. Of course he's the perfect
Batman.
person.
Yeah.
Well, okay, but it's like Taken with Liam Neeson. Of course, the guy whose daughter gets grabbed happens to be this super bad SOB who can hunt people down across international lines.
Yep.
And that really kind of stuck out to me, because that's kind of the point I'm trying to bring up, is that these characters, they are based in part on real people. And
Yep.
I could absolutely see every one of these people doing exactly what they've been portrayed to do in the right set of circumstances. Because I know these people, and they are average people who are very committed to certain ideals, and if pushed, they would defend those ideals in the way they see fit. And like Mark's character, who's one of the kind of the doubting Thomases in the group, who he's the one who's constantly trying to like back the main character down, who is just like go go go, action action action.
Yep.
Yeah, he's based on a couple of people that I know who they would be the ones to say, I'm not saying we don't need to do something, but I'm saying that might be a little over the top.
Right.
And
Yeah.
but the thing is that you're gonna have people in that kind of a group.
Well, and
Even
you
if you're
need it.
talking,
That's your yin and yang.
yeah, and even if you're talking about like a prepper group where, you're going to have those people that say, well, it's time to, loot and pillage and, go on raiding parties. You're going to have that person on the other side that says, well, hold on a second.
Yeah. What
It may
about our
not be time.
ethics?
It may not be time to go knock off the local Walmart just yet.
Yep. Yeah, I like that. Because again, that brings it back to the reality base, which is exactly what I try to do. So that people can understand, yep, yeah, this could be you. This could be you at work, and that's just what you'd have to do to react. So how about the locations in your book? You got real places, or did you extravagize, or
I didn't put like really hard locations down. I mean, it's based in Southeast Louisiana because that's where I live. That's the area I'm familiar with. And if I'm going to tell a story from my perspective, this is naturally where it's going to center. But like I stayed away in the first book from putting like street names and really hardcore road maps down, because then to me it was introducing an ability to have like a logical inconsistency that it didn't need to be there. You know what I'm saying? Like for the purposes of telling the story, if I say this is in this vicinity, it doesn't have to be really super specific to make the story work, to give you a locale. In the second book that I'm working on now, I do get a tiny bit more specific, but even that's not much. So I mean, it's based on a real area. It's just not real specific.
Like super specific, yeah. Because then people are like, "Oh, that's not how it is."
And that's by intention. Although if anybody's going to go Google Earthing, Southeast Louisiana, to try to prove me wrong about where things are in relationship to Earth things, you need a copy.
Yeah, you need a life. You need a life. So what, if you had like 2 points that you hope that readers take away from your book, what would those be?
I would hope that first of all, this would be a cautionary tale, because I mean, I'm not the only person to believe it, but I am the firmest believer in the fact that if we ever had what, honestly, I hate to say it, I'm seeing in the media today, they're talking about red flag laws being passed in certain states. There's
I know, I'm in California.
Yeah, well, there's also a federal red flag law that's being brought to the House with bipartisan support right now at the federal level, and that really makes me queasy, because the thing I point out to people is, I'm like, exactly what happened up in Maryland, where the police tried to execute a red flag warrant against this man, and he flatly refused to have his guns taken from him, and he wound up being shot in his own doorstep and died.
Yeah.
Now, there's a group of people out there who don't really probably care that a man lost his life in that encounter. In their mind, he's a crazy gun owner, he deserved it. And if that's your point of view, you're an awful human being and a bastard. But, here's a man who, like, it wasn't like he was shooting through people's windows. It's not like he was a murderer or rapist.
Did any kind of crime.
Yeah, and best I can tell from what little I've been able to find out, without the media burying the parts of the story they don't want to admit, it really just seems like he was probably, doing a lot of the same thing I do, making very broad, brash statements on social media. And if that is the standard by which we now allow the police to come into your home and take your guns at gunpoint, we have serious problems in this country. Mm-hmm. But that's the law they're floating right now. So my hope would be that people take away from this a cautionary tale, that if things continue to push, you're going to have more people than that one man in Maryland push back. And sooner or later, there's going to be a lot of dead people in this country because of that law. Because you cannot you cannot take from people that which is not yours to take. And that has been my point to the state all along. These are not rights you granted us. These are not rights that you gave us. These are rights we had. We had these rights before they were written down on a piece of parchment in the 18th century, and we have them today, and we'll have them forever. And if you didn't give them to us, you can't take them.
Take them. Yeah.
And
And you're not far off. New York is passing laws that you have to give up like 3 years of social media history and a year of your Google search to be able to get your gun license.
Yeah, but we can't get some people to give up their college transcripts, for God's sakes. I'm going to go down that road.
So I'm just like,
but I mean, that's my point. It's a cautionary tale, but beyond the cautionary tale to like the proponents of gun control, this is also a cautionary tale to the people who say, well, we'll just get our guns and stay in the street, we'll start fighting. I don't disagree with that sentiment, but I'm trying to point out to y'all, I'm trying to point out to that group from a person who has been involved in a conflict. Not like kicking doors and infantry and all that stuff. I've got friends that did that. That wasn't my line of work in the military. Right. But I've seen people come home from extremely violent encounters and violent situations and life and death situations who came home with, let's call it, substantial psychological issues.
Yeah.
I'm telling you that there's going to be an emotional cost to every single time you take a life, even if you feel justified doing it.
Yeah.
So this is a cautionary tale to both sides of this potential conflict. There's going to be a lot of people on both sides lose their lives. There's going to be a lot of people that live through this kind of a conflict and are going to be haunted by it for the rest of their lives. So I would hope that somewhere in this book, if it reaches a broad enough audience, maybe there'll be people on both sides of the aisle take a pause and think to themselves, maybe we need to find a way to work this out where we can avoid that.
Yeah, meet in the middle. So, like, okay.
Well,
we can talk.
And unfortunately, my version of meet in the middle is leave my damn guns alone and we can coexist just fine. But
fair enough. I have to agree with that one.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's not meet in the middle to some people, but my point of view is it's the same argument I've had with people like on a personal level at work and in the community and everything. And one young woman I work with was actually extremely upset to find out that I have not one but 2 scary black assault rifles in my home. Oh, no. And why would I need those and that whole rigmarole? And I looked at her, I'm like, you know how many people I've killed with those 2 rifles? And her eyes just flew open. I told her, I'm like, none, not a one, never.
Yeah. They don't get up off the shelf on their own.
I told her, I'm like, I've never hurt a single person with a fire of my own. I have drawn down on a few people who were about to commit some act of violence towards me or someone I love. And for those people, I would have canoed their head in a split second if I had to, but I haven't had to. I told her, I'm like, so the takeaway here is those firearms are not any danger to you or anybody else unless you are a danger to me. Now, are you going to threaten me or my family? And she said, well, of course not. I'm like, then you have nothing to worry about. You see how easy that is? If you leave me alone, I'll leave you alone. That's the way this works.
Love it.
But there's always going to be that group of people out there that doesn't want to leave other people alone, and that we're going to go right back to the historical parallels.
So I want to talk a little bit about your prepping activities, and we kind of went through some of your favorite authors. You mentioned a couple of them. You want to mention any other ones of your favorite novels? Because we kind of touched there.
The only other one that I have to throw out there, because he was super helpful to me helping write this book, L. Douglas Hogan.
Oh, I love him. Yep. Yes. Yeah, I love Doug. He's on my show. Yep.
Doug, actually, I got turned on to him by Franklin because I was just starting out and didn't know what I didn't know. And Franklin said, well, look, if you're looking for somebody to design your cover for you, talk to Doug. He does his own cover design. He designs covers for other people. So once Doug and I got introduced to each other, I mean, he designed my cover, first of all, and knocked that out of the park. Mm-hmm. And Doug was like my Jiminy Cricket every bit of this way. Every question I had, nice. Anytime I just needed an opinion, Doug was right there to advise me on a lot of the technical aspects of self-publishing, because Franklin subs out a lot of that work. Like, he does his own writing, but like the cover design and the formatting and all the little aspects of turning idea into finished work, he subs a lot of that out. And Doug does a lot more of that on his own. Which,
yeah, I do it all myself too.
Yeah, and it was like Franklin. It was never like Franklin said, "I don't have time." It was just like I can't, certain things I can't
Right?
tell you because
Yeah.
I don't do those things. And Doug really helped me with a lot of the technical advice to bring this book to fruition. So I have thanked him, and I owe him a lot of thanks for that because he's if it weren't for him, I think this would have fell flat on its face, and the cover would have been done in crayons because I did not have the artistic ability to do this.
Yeah, yeah, Doug's a great guy. I just really love working with him. We've actually talked about because I love his books. He delves a lot deeper into military technical avenues than I do, because I plain and simple don't have the experience there. And so I've talked to him about working side by side on some things for the end of my series because when I have big military activity going on, I'm kind of like, what? So yeah, love Doug. That's a great guy to bring up. So what is your favorite movie or TV show relating to the prepping genre?
Couldn't tell you. I disconnected my cable like
Love
3 years ago, and I've never been
Yep.
happier. I don't do. I mean,
Yeah, I
honestly,
don't have time, honestly.
and that's what I tell people. I'm like, if I have like free time to kill, which I don't, but if I ever did find it, you can usually find me in my garage reloading some ammunition or doing some
Yeah.
brass prep and if I'm doing that, I've always got, I've always got YouTube blowing up in my garage, and I'm watching like forgotten weapons, or I'm watching training videos, or I'm watching, videos on different skill sets I'd like to learn. And I'm just trying to like multitask and immerse myself while I'm doing other things. But as far as like sit down and watch a movie just for the entertainment value, I don't do that terribly often. Unless my wife or my daughter drag me off to a movie, then I'll go. But
yeah, fair enough.
I have that mind that just I constantly want to learn stuff, and I constantly want to be exposed to things, and I don't do a lot of I don't do a lot of like quote vegging out. It's just
I
not
love it.
me.
I love it. So how about your personal preparedness philosophy? We kind of got it. I love it. So let's go through it again.
Well, my personal prepping philosophy is always to start with a scenario that you want to prep for, and then let that scenario drive your decisions on skills to learn, gear to accumulate, levels of gear to accumulate, and that sort of thing. But, the one thing I try really hard in my podcast and in talking to other preppers to point out to people is I always tell people, I'm like, don't miss the small stuff. Like, I know preppers who they could eat MREs for the next 6 months and never run out, but they don't have medical gear, or they have enough medical gear to stock a reasonably sized hospital, but they
don't have water storage.
Well, they don't have water storage. Or here's something really simple. A lot of people miss. You and I talked about this. Don't want to put a whole lot of my business out in the street, but like right now, I'm having a little bit of a cash flow problem between me and my workplace. A lot of people don't have money in savings.
Yep.
And like I did an episode on budgeting and prepping, and I had people ask me like, how does that even matter in prepping? And I'm
huge.
like, but here's the thing of it. I'm like, budgeting is prepping, because if you have money in the bank, you can afford to be without a paycheck for a couple of months. You can afford to make drastic job changes. You can afford to move. You can do all sorts of things you can't do if you don't have money in the bank. Yep. So my point to people is, yes, we should absolutely plan for like Russia is parachuting in over Heartland, USA, and the zombies are eating people on the East Coast, and the West Coast is being destroyed by a supervolcano. But we should not forget the simple stuff like I have a 6-year-old. I have children's Tylenol on tap in this house, and children's ibuprofen and Band-Aids. And I would be an absolute horrible prepper if I had like an IFAC on every corner of the house, but I didn't have Band-Aids. Because if my kid's running around in the front yard with an Israeli bandage wrapped around a paper cut, I'm gonna look like an idiot. So I guess my point,
fair enough.
So I guess that's my point to everybody is, everything is prepping. Prepping's not it's not an activity, it's a lifestyle, it's a mindset. So when you are a prepper, you should be prepping for the small stuff and the big stuff and everything in the middle. You should have your beans, your bullets, and your Band-Aids, and you should probably have, the gas mask and the tourniquets and all the more serious stuff, but you got to start at basics.
Yeah. Got to start somewhere. So if you had to leave your house with only one item, what would it be?
firearm.
Yeah. Okay.
This gets really weird, because this is the question that, like, you could ask 20 preppers and get at least 18 different answers.
I know. That's why I love it.
Because somebody out there is going to say, well, you got to have a water filter. I mean, you can't live that long without water. We all know this. Somebody's going to say, well, let's say I live where there's a fresh water source. I don't need water on hand. I need food, or I need a knife, or I need a light, or whatever. But I go back to the idea that, the genesis for me prepping was Hurricane Katrina and societal unrest. So I always go back to the idea that if I cannot protect what is mine, I can't keep it. Mm-hmm. So I always default back to, not to say that like having a firearm overrides the need for anything else, but I always go back to that idea. If you cannot protect what is yours, you don't own it. If 5 guys come walking down the street right now, busting windows and kicking in doors, and they say, I'm here to take your stuff, you have 2 options. You either hand it over, or you put up a fight. And I'd rather put up a fight with an AR-15 and a couple hundred rounds than put up a fight, with a pointy stick.
Yeah, or a life straw.
Yeah, I'm gonna tell you something. Throwing a life straw at a looter is not really going to be that effective.
Right.
And it's not to say the life straw is not super useful. Just if I only get
the tool
one item
for the job.
Nope. If I only get one tool, I say give me the one tool that allows me to keep everything else that I would bring with me, or will find, or in a pinch will take from somebody else.
Yeah. So what do you think is the most important prepping activity that you could do?
I think the most important activity is to cover all your basics, and bear in mind this is a lifestyle. Like when you're we talk about a lot in like the self-defense world, because that crosses over in prepping a lot. But I talk about it in self-defense all the time. I'm like, you can go to the range every single day. You can be able to shoot, quarter-size groups, 25 yards. You can have the newest, bestest, most awesome Glock on earth with the cool stuff all over it, the cool guy holster. But if you sit in a restaurant with your back to the front door, you missed a step.
Yep.
Because to crib a really corny statement in the military, they always used to tell us, like, the gun is a tool, the mind is the weapon. And I firmly believe that. If your mind is fully engaged in what you're doing, then it will make use of what's around you. If you do the simple stuff, like every time we go in a restaurant, my wife knows she's not going to take that seat that faces the front door, because that's where I need to be, because I'm the one that conceal carries. And we've had this discussion about, if there's ever some kind of a violent incident, you grab my daughter, you run into the kitchen, or you run into the bathroom, you get out of the line of sight, and I'm going to make myself the assailants. I'm gonna get the assailants' full and undivided attention while you get my daughter out of the area.
Out of there.
Yeah. It's like I've told her before. I'm like, I'm not saying I'm Superman. I'm saying that I've trained myself to a degree of being able to defend myself with a handgun that I feel certain I can. But if the 3 of us can't all make it out of there at that moment, I want you 2 to get out, and I'm going to take my chances. Mm-hmm. So, but it all comes back to the mindset. The mindset tells me I need to face the front door. The mindset tells me I need to pre-plan this with my wife. The mindset tells me here's an idea. I have my concealed carry handgun in my holster right now, and as soon as I get done with you, it's going to be time for my normal Sunday ritual of take the gun out to the garage, field strip it, clean it, get all the pocket lint and the dust out of it, clean the magazines, check the magazines for corrosion, because it is a weekly habit with me that my carry guns get cleaned and checked and everything else. It's a monthly habit that I check the secondary firearms that stay in the safe. It's, to me, because I constantly have these habits that I'm building into my life, they maintain a level of readiness. But if your mind isn't engaged in this lifestyle, if your mind isn't working to make this stuff work, it's just stuff.
Right.
I mean, I can take my 9mm out the holster and lay it on the table in front of me. It's not going to save me from anything. It's not going to protect my family.
Right.
The gun is the tool. The MREs are the tool. The IFAC is the tool. Your mind's what makes it work. And this is also why people say all the time, you have to learn the skill set. You have to learn how to use your gear. You have to push your knowledge.
You have to practice it. You have to keep learning.
You have to. I mean, look, you said yourself, you're a martial artist. Do you
Yep.
think you're going to go toe-to-toe with the black belt your first day on the job?
Yeah, no.
No, you're going to
No.
no. I was in martial arts years ago. I got myself tuned up by a couple of third degree and a fifth degree black belt a few times.
Yeah.
Until I worked my way up to about a second degree black belt, and I was finally able at a point where I could trade blows with a lot of them.
Yep.
But the point is that you have to train and you have to condition your mind to be able to respond to these types of environments and these types of emergencies. If you don't do that, it's just stuff.
It's just stuff, and you're missing the whole point.
Yeah,
Well, Phil,
because you can take that person who doesn't have all that stuff, but they have the mindset. They'll find the stuff.
right? Yeah, that's what I always say. It's like I would rather have tools to get stuff than stuff and no tools to get stuff, and the mind is the biggest tool, the body second. So fair enough. All right, Phil, well, that takes care of it. I want to thank you for coming on the show. Go ahead and let people know where they can find you, where they can find your podcast, where they can get a hold of your book. I know I'm going to be getting a hold of it and checking it out. So,
well, the podcast is easy to find on iTunes and Stitcher, Matter of Facts Podcast. We have a blog, mofpodcast.com. We're easy to find on Facebook, Matter of Facts Podcast. The book, American Insurgent, is exclusively available through Amazon as a paperback or Kindle. And if you search for it, just make sure you're getting the one that is from Phil Rabalais, because apparently there's like 4 others.
That's one thing you always got to check out. Yeah. I'm always like, oh, I love that title. Let's see how many other books are named that.
Yeah. There is also an author Phil Rabalais page on Facebook, which that'd be a good place to go if you're interested in the book, because there are links there, showing you like where to get it, and that's where I'll be dropping information when the sequel finally comes out. I can't even give you a date for that because it's still in progress.
Right.
But I am working.
That's awesome.
On it.
And I'll go ahead and link through all of the links directly to your book and on my page and my website, so on my survival guide. So go ahead and check it out there, everybody. All righty, Phil, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Sarah. It's been a blast.
All right, Phil, thanks so much for coming on the show today and sharing your story with us. Everybody got to get out there and check out American Insurgent. Like I say, it's one I'd love to pick up and read right about now. I guess I'll just have to wait till my next vacation time and try and slip a book in there, or maybe if I get to go traveling or something, or I could pick up the audiobook and go from there. So great story, and I really look forward to checking it out. So thanks so much, Phil, for coming on. I also want to give a shout out to my supporters. As always, love you guys. You guys are what makes the Changing Earth podcast go around. Seems like everything to host this podcast is getting a little bit more costly these days. And so it really, really helps to keep the show going with your support. So thank you so much for doing that, going out and, just showing your love. If you'd like to become a supporter, which I really hope you do, head on over to www.authorSarahFhathaway.com/support. That's www.authorSarahFhathaway.com/support. Thank you all for listening today. We are looking forward to another great season of podcasting, as long as the schedule keeps going. And I got my partner in crime now, so we'll just try and keep the show rolling and keep you entertained and educated at the same time. So thanks again for all your time and all you do. And until next time, remember, dream, survive, thrive.
Thank you for joining Sarah for this episode of the Changing Earth podcast. Don't forget to pick up your copy of Day After Disaster, Without Land, The Walls of Freedom, Battle for the South, and Dark Days in Denver at www.authorSarahFhathaway.com. If you love Sarah's books and this podcast, please head over to Amazon or iTunes and let everyone know by leaving a review.